ready to start. And basically, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, when we came back right after Pesach, we said this is now going to serve as a transition. We reviewed, just to remind everyone, again, Amatzia and his behavior that reminded us, interestingly, of his own father's behavior. And Yoash ben, again, Yoash of Yehuda, where the early part of his life was marked primarily by devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it seems that everything is wonderful. Again, but both and radically altered their religious careers later on, and whether it's the killing of the priests, if you remember, of Yoash, or in the case of Amatzia, again, disastrously managing a war, again, in his case with Shomron, which resulted, both of them, in Yerushalayim being penetrated. Right, and therefore both of these time periods ending with, again, an enemy coming in, both of them assassinated by political opponents, and therefore what we see is that this is a very challenging time historically. In other words, Aram is still a threat, again, in the north, even though we said if they're engaged in civil war, that's always indicative of the forces in the north being weakened during this time. So we all know if Aram is weakened, who's coming up and gaining power?
Ashur.
Ashur, excellent. And so this is important to keep in mind that there must be some type of tension going on amongst the ancient Mesopotamian empires that leaves a vacuum for the local ones, i.e. Yehuda and Israel, to come and regain control, and that's what we're going to see right now. And so we're going to see that Yehuda conquers Edom, yay, again, everything seems to be wonderful. Again, and now we're going to see how also Yeravam ben Yoash is going to conquer all the way up to the area of the Tigris and the Euphrates. And I think it was Chavi who mentioned last time we haven't had control over these areas from the time of Shlomo HaMelech. Now this looks wonderful. Wow, we're going back to the time of Shlomo HaMelech. But deep down we know it's not really, because under Shlomo, all these surrounding nations felt indebted to him. Not only felt indebted, but because David HaMelech had conquered them, they're actually paying regional taxes to Shlomo. Whereas here, and why are they able to regain control? Because they're involved in strife amongst themselves, which means that at any moment, what can happen?
Some other power can come in.
These powers are going to take control and ultimately come and control also the areas of Yisrael and Yehuda. So now we're finally in Parak Yudalid.
No, we were supposed to do Amos.
We said we're going to look at Amos. Yes. But first we need a little background here. Don't worry. Thank you, Nahama. And yes,
and it was
we
a
also
Haftorah.
Yeah, it was Haftorah.
And I even had that in mind when we were saying it, because
it was the good part of Amos, which is like so not the real.
Because now we're going to go back a few pakim and see the not so good part of Amos, exactly, which are all the previous 9 chapters. So again, when we look at Malachim Bet, again we're in Parak Yudalid, Pasuk Chaf Gimel. B'shnat 15 shana la'Amatziyahu ben Yoash melech Yehuda. So now, again, this is while Amatzia, who we just said is going to be assassinated, but towards the end of his career, Malach Yeravam ben Yoash melech Yisrael b'Shomron 41 shana. Now we discussed that he's going to be the longest lasting, again, Israelite king since the times of Achav. And basically this shows his strength. Now that also means that there's going to be security, but not only that, there's security because he's the 4th of the generations of Yehu that were promised. Excellent, which already tells us that, wow, there really is a certain level of stability going on in the Shomron. But at the same time, we were a little confused because take a look at Pasuk Chaf Dalid. Vayashara b'nei Hashem lo sar mikol chatot Yeravam ben Nebat asher achti et Yisrael, but he seems to be perpetuating the iniquities of Yeravam ben Nebat. As a matter of fact, Chazal are going to call him Yeravam Hasheni, the second Yeravam, intentionally reminding you of
He's
the
no
first
better than the
Yeravam,
first
the one who destroyed it, Avodat Hashem, the one who led the people really to the beginnings of Avodah Zarah and the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And so here we have Yeravam ben Yoash, who's repeating the sins. Now the other reason why Chazal compare him to Yeravam ben Nebat is if Yeravam ben Nebat was the first of the kings of the Shomron, of the northern kingdom, then for all intents and purposes, Yeravam ben Yoash is going to be the last, right? So even though
there's a few small ones after, right?
And we're going to have another, again, we'll see, 6 kings. You're going to say, okay, Shani, he's not the last. No. For all intents and purposes, 6 kings over the course of literally the next 40 years tells you that there are coups d'etats all the time. Again, there isn't going to be stability in the government. So he is viewed as the last of the strong kings of the north. So
Ben
during his
Yoash
time,
means they were
Ashur,
brothers?
Yeravam ben Yoash.
This Mamatzia ben Yoash and
Oh,
Yeravam.
no,
Ben
remember
Yoash.
there are two different Yoashes,
Different
Yoash.
which is why it's very
Okay.
confusing. Don't worry, I'm gonna give you, remember I told you I'm not gonna give you a chart while we learn it, because I don't want you to be dependent on the chart. But at the end of the year, you'll get a nice chart. Here we go, for summer review.
Is there
Who was
a
she?
difference between Kol Chatot Yeravam Menavat and just Chatot
Yafeh, and Chatot Yeravam Menavat, yes indeed. If you see Kol Chatot, then he's worse. Right, so here's a good example, again, of Kol Chatot Yeravam Menavat. Hu heshiv et Gabul Yisrael milavo chamat ad yam harabat devar Hashem Elokei Yisrael asher diber b'yad avdo Yonah ben Amittai hanavi asher begat hachefer. And this pasuk is so confusing. Right after telling us how terrible he is, the Navi then says, oh, by the way, but he was able to restore the borders all the way of Yisrael, all the way, again, to Lavo Chamat. Lavo Chamat is referring to, again, the areas not of, Hamat Gader, north of Tiberi, or farther north.
Syria.
And basically the areas of Syria. Excellent. Again, that's why I mentioned too, basically, again, the areas of the Euphrates. Again, all the way, again, including Yam HaArava, and just as we just saw Amatya conquered Edom, again, the area of the Arava, so he conquers the northern Arava, again, the northeastern borders, Kidvar Hashem Elokei Yisrael, as predicted, basically, by Hashem, that was told to him by Yonah ben Amittai Hanavi, who's from Gad Hefer. So we mentioned last time that this helps us understand a little bit of the personality of Yonah ben Amittai before we see him in Sefer Yonah, because he seems to be, and remember we also discussed that he's the Navi that, according to Chazal, is being
gives
sent by
people-
Elisha to tell Yehu that he's going to serve as the king, and his task is to wipe out the entire family of Achav. Do you remember that? And from way back when, in which case, again, we see that this poor Navi, why do I say this poor Navi? Because
no one
Yonah is being
listens.
sent, again, to always tell
The worst
gives
news.
them-
bad people
But
that
he
good
gives
things
them-
are gonna happen to them.
He gives them an
Potentially.
opportunity to do tshuva,
Exactly.
but they don't.
But they don't, and you can imagine then that when it comes to telling Ashur that they have an opportunity to do tshuva, what's going to be his reaction? No, exactly. Lebro'acha mipnei Hashem. That Hashem, no, I'm tired of this already. I did this with Yehu, I did it with Yeravam ben Yoash, and it's one thing within Malchut Yisrael. It's another thing to tell
An emanation.
Gena, and therefore, again, we get a sense of the personality. Now, especially as Chazal can serve his personality as that of Eliyahu, right? Saying he's the child that Eliyahu revived. Again, tells us even more that he basically is going to be this more bombastic, that maybe that's why Hashem actually sends Yonah. You see Yonah? Again, that these are people who potentially can do tshuva. And Yonah, very much like Eliyahu, has that very kanaut personality, and now we understand why Boreach mipnei Hashem. But as Nechama reminded us, we're a little surprised when we see this, because we're not only supposed to be learning the actual historiographical texts of what happened during this time, namely what we call Nevi'im Rishonim. Again, we're also supposed to be learning Nevi'im Achronim. So if you remember from our introduction to the Shi'ur, Nevi'im Achronim are not chronologically later. As a matter of fact, according to the Psukim themselves, there are only 3 Nevi'im Achronim. The Nevi'im Achronim are those who live after the Nevi'im Rishonim, whom Zachariah refers to as all the Nevi'im who lived through the time period of
Korban Bayit.
Korban Bayit Rishon, in which case the only Nevi'im Achronim, according to Tanakh, are really
Haggai,
Haggai,
Zechariah,
Zechariah,
Malachi.
Malachi, and that's exactly what Chazal corroborate as well. If you remember, the reason why we include Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yecheskel, and all of Trei Asar in this category of Nevi'im Achronim is because of the printing press. Because the Radak, in particular, when his work was published by Sensino Press, they couldn't fit all of Yeshayahu Yirmiyahu as part of his Perush of Nevi'im Rishonim, and therefore they divided it. The printing press divided it. Now, the reason why we've allowed this mistake to perpetuate is because it works nicely for the sake of genre, literally for educational purposes, to teach Nevi'im Rishonim more as the historiographical texts, right? The ones that tell us the narrative of what happened during that time, whereas Nevi'im Achronim are really compilations of the speeches of Nevuah. But it's important as we learn to remember that this is going on simultaneously, that just as there are, so to speak, prophetic historians writing down history, again, those same prophets are also giving speeches, right? They're
the
not just
people.
writing down in retrospect, again, they're giving speeches, just to give you lahavdil, right? Meaning in 100 years from now, in order to understand what happened during this time period, again, people are going to be reading Netanyahu's autobiography, which, by the way, ended,
Years
before October 7th, way before, and they're going to be reading or watching on YouTube, if they still have it then. Again, now they'll watch his speeches that he gave, right? Everyone see? Are you going to get exactly the same perspective? No,
No.
right? Not even from Netanyahu himself, which is interesting. But then you have to speak to Amit Segal, but he won't be alive. So you'll have to write what Amit
His
Segal
newsletters.
His newsletters, bidiyuk. Right? Everyone see this? So what we're going to do now is open up Amos and get a sense of what's going on during this time period. So many
in the
sources.
future.
Exactly.
But think how many articles these days are just collections of tweets.
Exactly.
And
I don't know how historians, I think about this all the time.
It's not gonna be
How they
historians,
define
it's gonna be AI.
An
so
AI
AI
compilation,
Right, it
oh
will be.
God.
Excellent, good point.
Oh,
That's
AI
right
is
it.
gonna go through.
So
Twitter.
we're
But then
not,
AI is
and they'll
gonna
have to be very sophisticated. They'll have to know
There's
the
hyperlinks back and
biases
forth.
It's
of
very
all the
scary.
different,
Tweeters.
Yeah,
right? Meaning, we'll have to know.
It won't, it'll just be lies.
yeah, it's
Correct.
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very scary. We were
That's
just,
very scary.
we
That
were-
means
yeah, that we get to
our
rewrite history.
Children are going to be learning distorted history.
we were learning Pirkei Avot yesterday.
It's a very scary thought.
Yeah, we were learning Pirkei Avot yesterday, and it was exactly the parak of like
Perek
Al
Avot.
Tishka, exactly. And that we like have a group, we have Suda Shashida, and we like learn Pirkei Avot,
It's
and
beautiful.
then
Like, can we pause? Can everyone do that? Can you do this with your family? Get together with your friends?
it's friends
Learn Pirkei
also.
Avot. That's
It's nice.
beautiful.
Now the big kids are in Sneef, so like it's nice. So it's just so we get a
But
chance.
they
And
know that their parents are learning Pirkei Avot. That's beautiful.
no, it's really nice, and we pass around the sefer, and everyone like reads the parak and then gives like a.
You should get their booklets.
Yeah, so we do that also in our family.
Oh, really?
Everyone reads a mission
Yeah.
as we go around to Dash Sheet, and we have beautiful booklets that were published by Sarah and Elazar. I'll try to get you.
Oh, thank you. Well, so I actually had the Mishnah about like I can't
Lots of
remember it.
Chaver L'Reshut.
Yeah,
Stay
and
away from political.
and no, and about remembering, like you have to like
Oh.
if you forget something, then all your Torah is like
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
and
Sometimes that's important.
yeah, and my daughter has it's like the time now, they have like Bogoliot in Historia, and she's learning, and she was complaining, and she's like, oh, why do I have to know this, or this, or this, and like it was exactly that. And like the truth is, like in the future, like it's going to be really scary, because the prompts in AI, I mean, you can look at a picture of Napoleon and he's African American now, because there's not enough black representation in history.
That's
and
hilarious. But why aren't they doing that with Jesus, who shouldn't be white?
I mean, it's, but like I'm saying, it's totally subjective. It's whoever puts in those prompts or whatever. It's not historians, it's not Nevi'im. That's what's going to be history. And it's scary, and that's
And the
exactly
truth is
what the
you
Mishnah
already
was
see
talking about.
You already see it, because even with regard to the Israel-Palestinian debate, and you look at their textbooks and you look at our textbooks, right? And very different.
Same events in a
So,
completely different
Exactly.
perspective.
Exactly.
So if that's what's going to be available, and especially if that's the majority, meaning if AI is getting its information from.
Well, we're already
everything.
seeing that with Wikipedia. AI it regurgitates Wikipedia,
Yeah.
which has been completely changed to be anti-Israel.
Yeah.
It's like when you read Zinn, I know Zinn, and when the People's History of the United States, like you learn regular American history, and then you read Zinn,
What is
and he
it?
basically tells the story of the United States history, but from the perspective of the losers, so to speak.
Yeah.
So because history is always told by those who win.
Yeah.
So it was like a mind
This is
altering.
why the Brits don't.
It really is.
And there was a movement. It probably also started.
What
like,
is that?
a lot of different types of movements within education, but to tell multiple stories.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
really scary.
That's
Yeah.
why we're gonna need the restoration of Nevuah with that.
To get to understand what truth really is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
seriously.
No, but can you imagine the fake Nevi'im?
Oh, for
Who are
sure.
just
What do you mean?
like-
We already have
They're
them.
bots.
Using-
They're bots.
No, but now we don't have people who believe Nevuah. So like,
Right.
Just discussing, oh, that's AR generated.
Maybe Mashiach will have like a digital aspect to it to help reframe like the content.
And
Whoa.
that's the goal, that the world will, Vayashem Melech HaKol Arts Vayim Hashem HaKadosh Echad,
It has to become
That-
media.
people are gonna recognize, and therefore no one's gonna, even those who distort reality and facts, everyone will know it, right? Everyone will know, oh, that's fake news, that's fake news. Hopefully, and we have a lot to dive in for. Okay, so let's open up Amos, and we're going to see something remarkable. And just as Nechama mentioned, really in order to understand the scene that we're going to take a look at Amos, we need a little bit of background on Amos. So that's what we're going to take a look at now. So if everyone can just open up first to Parak Aleph of Amos, and then we're going to skip around just for a moment, especially because just less than 24 hours ago, or depending on whether you're in Tashkama, then you heard the beautiful Haftorah of Amos. So I feel that we can't really end even this shiur on Amos without the very end, and you'll see why, keeping in mind that Amos is very different than other Nevi'im. Firstly, as we open up, Devrei Amos Asher Hayad Benoktim Mitokoa. What's interesting about him?
He's
From
from
the
the Judean
here.
kingdom.
He's from the hood.
He's from the Gosh.
He's from the Judean area.
And again, that is interesting, keeping in mind that, Hosea, Yoel, we don't know exactly where he's from. Yoel is delivering the word about Yerushalayim and military attacks on Yerushalayim. And Hosea is clearly in Beit El, but what's also different is that we don't hear his father's name. We don't even hear, and therefore we don't know how he became a Navi. And therefore our sense is that he wasn't trained by his father to be a Navi. As a matter of fact, we're going to take a look at Parak Zayin, where he's going to say explicitly, Lo Navi Anochi, below Ben Navi Anochi. Rather, HaKadosh Baruch Hu literally just appointed me, right? Which reminds us of the appointment of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Hashem, basically, on my own, I reached this level deserving of Nevuah. And Hashem said, okay, this is what you have to do. Now, what also makes Amos very unique is that not only is Hosea delivering a message in the north, but we're going to see clearly Amos is in Beit El. And therefore, many of the Parshanim wonder, maybe he's from not Tekoa of the Gush, maybe he's from Tekoa of Shomron. However, we're going to see from his agricultural references and the very fact that Amatzia in Parak Zayin is going to say, Brach el Eretz Yehuda, basically run away to Eretz Yehuda, gives us a sense that he's a native of Yehuda, that this is Tekoa of Yehuda. Literally, again, not 5 minutes away from here, depending on that traffic also.
As the crow flies.
V'mei Uzziah melech Yehuda, u'v'mei Rabban ben Yoash melech Yisrael. Now this is also interesting because whenever it comes to the exposition, you can check this of all the Treyasar, only when the kings of Yisrael are mentioned, we also have the kings of Yehuda. If he's only a Navi for Yehuda, you'll only hear about
Yehudim.
the king of Yehuda. If he's a Navi for the king of Yisrael, you'll always hear the king of Yehuda and Yisrael. Basically, to remind us that even if Yisrael is the stronger and the larger kingdom, again, the basis is still Yehuda, right? The Nevuah is coming from Yerushalayim, from the presence of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, as we continue in the Treyasar, Hosea, Yoel, Amos, Obadiah, right? Obadiah, again, we also don't know exactly which Obadiah this is and when he lives, but Obadiah also is speaking to Yehuda. It's very clear. Again, and then we have Micha, Nahum, Chavakuk. They all seem to be based in Yehuda. So Amos and Hosea are the ones who are really speaking to Malchei Yisrael. And then we have to ask ourselves, wait a second, Mabriut, we already have Hosea speaking, and Hosea is clearly, again, the elder by virtue of the fact that he's going to begin before the time period of Yeravim ben Yoash and before Uzziah. So again, why do we also need Amos? And then as you continue in Amos, you realize, wait a second, these are two very different Nevi'im. Hosea focuses much more on the idolatry that's taking place in the areas of Beit El. In other words, the Ben Adam L'Makom, and Amos is more Ben Adam L'Chashero. He is the very social-oriented. I always say, if you want to picture the Nevi'im, and I think that it's very healthy to picture the Nevi'im, which, again, Chaman Shir already told us, even the skin color will have an effect on how we look at them. I always picture Hosea as more, please forgive me for this, but the Dumbledore personality, long white beard, wearing a saintly coat, I don't know why, sparkling blue eyes, and again, he's very much like this priestly character speaking against the distortion of Avodat Hashem. Whereas Amos is like Mr. Cosmopolitan, he's the one with the leather, computer case around he's wearing a triple-breasted suit,
He's
if there
younger.
is such a thing. He's younger. Again, he's wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots,
He's like Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, Yafem
What?
Mahon. And
Indiana
he is very
He's a cowboy.
sophisticated. And so I'm putting him in a suit with cowboy boots.
Yeah.
And he's very sophisticated.
Or Harrison
So he's
Ford.
from
I could
Texas.
do a younger
Just
Harrison.
like, Tacoma.
Yeah.
Texas.
Totally.
Totally.
Closer. Yeah, no question, no question. By the way, you want to hear something funny? So one of the I was in, not this one, the one before Pesach, I was in Houston. And I just happened to be in Houston on Texas Day. It was
What
is
this
Wow.
Texas Day?
weekend. Texas Day,
It's like
everyone,
majorly patriotic.
it's the
Texas.
week right before their rodeo.
Oh,
The
wow.
rodeo like takes over the
Yeah,
state.
yeah.
And they're like, Shani, you're here at the best time. I'm like, oh my. And I'm just like hoping I make it back to Israel, which I didn't. This was the one before Purim. And so I come to the school to give shiurim. And I'm not joking when I say that there are like bulls in the,
Yeah.
because even the school gets ready for the rodeo. And they have all, so at
Even
the
the
same
Jewish
time, it was
school.
also
So did you
Shabbos
see
Sachar.
Pascha
It was
Gemara?
right before. So I was thinking, oh, this is like Purim shtick. Oh yeah, Purim shtick. Yes. Texas Day. And all the kids are dressed for the rodeo. They're all wearing, cowboy hats. And I was like, oh my gosh, like now I picture like
It's like
Amos,
rodeo.
out there in the middle. And by the way, the funniest thing was coming to shul on Shabbos, because what are all the women wearing?
Cowboy
Cowboy
Cowboy hats.
So
Like,
cool.
That's
okay,
great.
is this like their
Did you
Kisui
get the
Rosh?
memo?
I didn't get the
I didn't
memo. I
get that.
told them
I
I
don't-
got the memo. And now they're like, no, don't worry. Like we wear like normal Kisuye Rosh also, just to say, no. But they all, it's like just so
That's
interesting culturally. Okay, in any case, Amos, picture him, wearing his like Shabbos suit, but also his cowboy hat, because he's from the Nukdim. He himself is a rancher. And therefore, again, it seems that even though that Barbanel believes that he's from the lower status of society, most of the Persianim say no. He's a very wealthy man who's going to speak to the aristocrats of society in a very sophisticated way. And if you open up even to his, literally, his opening speech, Hashem mitzion yishadom Yerushalayim yitin kolo vavlu neot haroim v'yabesh rosh hakarmel kama Hashem al shlosha peshei damasak ve'al arba lo ashivenu. He speaks in the language of the time, which is 3 and 4. And basically, I like to call the first nevuah, tell me more, meaning he first speaks about all the punishments that are going to be wrought upon the surrounding nations, and only then does he say, Al shlosha peshei Yisrael v'al arba lo ashivenu. And basically, he knows how to woo his audience in, because this is a foreign audience. But what's so significant is that speaking to this foreign audience, specifically in the more agriculturally bountiful areas of the north, he warns them of the gradual deterioration of their agriculture, of their society, of their economic prowess, ultimately their military prowess. And each one of his nevuot just gets scarier and scarier. Again, he's famous for saying, okay, you're going to run away from the lion and the tiger and the bear, oh my, and then you're going to finally get home, and
You're gonna get.
then the snake is going to catch you, from between the crevice of the wall. And basically, I call Amos like the introduction to horror films, right? Meaning, which are more today, psychological thrillers, right? That's what Amos does. He really works on our psyche. And basically, you see that he's telling us how terrible it is. You're going to see rain in one city, but it's not going to be in another city, and then only 10% of the city is going to survive. And then, again, 10% of those people are going to survive, and you're going to wonder whether, again, the child in the corner is really still alive. Has, again, don't even say it, right? Basically, he really takes us into, again, these difficulties. But now, with every, literally, chapter of Nevuah being more aggravated with regard to the destruction, we even hear, and in Perek Vav, a series of what are called Kol Kerani. We see a series of images that he shares with the people of Shomron, and then he tells them, this is after explaining Hay Hashananim, they're also comfortable. Take a look at Perek Zayin. And this is after Hashem telling him, yes, and the houses are going to be destroyed, and Hashem is going to literally take them away. You know what? Look at the last pasuk of Perek Vav. Tell me what this reminds you of. And kineni mekim alechem beit Yisrael Hashem Elokei Hatzvaot Goy. I'm literally brewing up a nation that's going to stand against you. V'lachatzu etchem milevo chamat ad nachal ha'arava. And they are going to oppress you all the way from Levo Chamat all the way to Nachal Ha'arava. What is that supposed to remind you of?
Yeah.
The same areas that had just been conquered. So where is Amos in all of the Nevuah, let's say, of Yonah ben Amittai? Who do you think came first?
Well,
Obviously,
Yonah.
Yonah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because Yonah spoke about the expansion. So
Yeah.
if Amos is speaking about a nation that's going to come and destroy them in these specific areas, that means that they must have these areas under their control, which means that Yonah's Nevuah already was fulfilled.
No, just we have that from the introductory sentence, because of, he said he did later than Noah.
So here we're going to take a look and see Yonah Perek Zayin. So now we're going to learn a very interesting Nevuah. I'm going to quickly review the first part, and then we're going to take a look at the second part that takes us all the way to Perek Chet. Korani Hashem Elokim b'nei yotzer govai b'tchilat alut halekesh v'nei lekesh achar gizei hamalach v'ya m'kila lechol etzei haaretz. Basically, he sees all these different types of grasshoppers that are consuming the agriculture, and he turns to Hashem. Hashem Elokim slachna miyakum Yaakov ki katonhu. What do we know about grasshoppers already? Also from Yoel, but also from Makat Arbe.
No
They don't
mercy.
just destroy the crop, they destroy the roots, which means that it can't grow again, until you plant it again. And what does Amos understand from this nevuah? If the grasshoppers are eating it up, then that means the entire economy is going to collapse. Again, Hashem, really? Again, then how will Yaakov ever get up again? Ki katonhu, nicham Hashem azot, lo tieh, amar Hashem. So Hashem says, okay, again, I'll have nacham on this. It won't be like this. I mean,
But it's
it won't
also
be
the
so
king's
bad.
agriculture, not just anyone's agriculture.
Exactly,
It's the
yafeh
king's.
ma'od.
Gizei hamel.
Mitzriyan, ko hirani, meaning reminding us almost back at Makat Mitzrayim. Ko hirani Hashem Elokim, minei korei larav ba'esh. Hashem Elokim, vatochel tohom rabah, v'aflat hachelek. And sure enough, then he sees, okay, not grasshoppers, but what's going to eat up? Fire. Fire is going to destroy the chelek, meaning the agricultural bounty. And it's not as bad as grasshoppers, why not?
Because it doesn't.
Because the ground can
Doesn't eat
regrow
up the root,
afterwards.
But still, va'omar Hashem Elokim chadalna, miyakum Yaakov ki katonu. Fine, nicham Hashem azot. It won't all be destroyed. Gam hi lo tiyamar Hashem Elokim korani. V'nei Adonai nitzav al chomat anach, u'biyado anach. He sees a leveler. Now, a leveler can be used for two things. What can it be used for? And that's why, vayomar Hashem Elai ma'ata ro'eh Amos. Remember, like by Yirmiyahu, Hashem says, what do you see? How do you think it's interpreted?
Fear nothing.
Now, when do you use a leveler?
When you're building.
When you're building.
But also when you're destroying.
But also when you're destroying. So which one do you think it is? So if you were Amos, what is Hashem trying to say?
Destroying.
Out of context, again, it could mean something good. But Amos, what do you think? In this context of grasshoppers and combustible, all the agriculture being destroyed by fire. Sure enough, he says, uh-oh, anach, v'yom Hashem, v'yomar Adonai, kineni sam anach b'kerav Yisrael lo osifot avor lo. I am leveling them, basically, raising them down to the ground. Then Hashem ubamot yischak u'mikteshei Yisrael yecharavu. Now, what's going to be destroyed? So notice this isn't about the economic destruction. This is about
The Avodah Zarah.
their avodah zarah. All the bamot. Then Hashem ubamot yischak. Basically, all these bamot, literally of tzchok, are going to be destroyed. Miktashei Yisrael yecharavu. Where are the primary miktashim of Yeravam ben Nevat, which are now perpetuated through Yeravam ben Yoash? Dan and Beit El. And V'kamti el Beit Yeravam b'charev. This is during the time of Yeravam ben Yoash. I am going to destroy the house of Yeravam. So this is Amos's nevuah. He's sharing this with Am Yisrael. And this one, does Amos say, oh, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't do it? No. Vayishlach Amatzia Kohen Beit El. So now we know, where are we?
In Beit
We're in Beit El. He's delivering these nevuot. And this is going to be, and that's why I'm so excited that we're learning this, because this is a phenomenal parak of nevuah where we actually see the dynamics of the Torah. I mean, generally, we only hear of the speech that the Navi gives. Here we're going to hear about the reaction, right? It's almost as if this is being covered by, Fox News or something, and you'll see why I said Fox. Again, Vayishlach Amatzia Kohen Beit El. So sure enough, then Amatzia is there. He's a Kohen in Beit El, and the Parshanim deliberate whether or not he is a Kohen Emet, right? Meaning he is a real Levi Kohen. Because what do you know about Yerabam Ben Nevat? Back to Malachim Aleph Parakeh Bet. What do you
He
know?
promoted non-Kohanim.
all those
Remember,
bad.
he
Deliberate
restored
to be
Kedusha to Adam also. He allowed people who were in Kohanim to serve as Kohanim. So is he like a real Kohen or a fake Kohen? Not only that, but again, we didn't go to Beit El together. We didn't yet. Again, when you go to Beit El, you can actually see the grounds of what many believe are the Mikdash of Yerabam Ben Nevat. And what's interesting is what else was going on. Remember we said he disordered Kedusha Tamakom. He basically allows for, he doesn't start with Avodah Zarah. He's worshiping God in Beit El. Remember this? So now I'm wondering, is he a Kohen LaHashem or a Kohen for Avodah Zarah? Now, the very fact that he's in Beit El, which is the kings will call it the magisterial house of worship, tells us that what's going on here. They may still be worshiping Hashem, but he's also worshiping Avodah Zarah. So basically, he's part of the Yerabam Ben Yoash camp, whether he's a real Kohen, not a real Kohen. That seems to be less of concern, in as much as the fact that he's a Kohen in Beit El tells you that he is a hiree of the king, right? He's an employee of Yerabam. So he hears Amos saying that the entire house is going to be destroyed, right? He hears Amos declaring literally the destruction of the Malchut. He is an employee of the Malchut. What does he say? Again, so take a look at this. Vayishlach Amatzia Kohen Beit El El Yerabam Ben Melech Yisrael Lemor Kashar Alecha Amos Bekara Beit Yisrael. What is Amos doing? He's starting a rebellion, right? He wants people to turn against you. Lo tuchal haaretz lachil kol dvarav. Again, the haaretz meaning the government can't contain this. Someone is speaking against the government. Can you imagine that? Again, now someone is riling up the people. Ki ko amar Amos b'cherev yamut Yerabam Yisrael galu yigla mi'alat mato. And even though we didn't hear these exact words from Amos, he basically has been saying this. Then that Yerabam's house is going to be destroyed b'cherev, and Yisrael is going to be exiled. Now Chazal take a look and say, wait a second, what's the next pasuk? Vayomer Amatzia, meaning what would we have expected should have happened?
Yerabam should say something.
Yerabam should say something. Yerabam should send his
something.
troops to kill Amos. Right? No reaction. And Chazal say, wow, because he didn't react,
He gets
meaning
rewarded.
he just like ignored what Amatzia says, because we don't find any. Now it doesn't mean that he didn't react in any way, but we don't find any reaction. Chazal said that's why Yerabam was successful and basically was allowed to stay as king for 41 years, right? So that's the explanation of Chazal here. But Amatzia is not giving up. Vayomer Amatzia, he's there. El Amos Choseh, lech brach lacha l'Eretz Yehuda. I'm warning you, Yerabam is going to send troops. If I were you, I would go back basically to Eretz Yehuda. And that's what makes Amos so unique. Usually, the Nevi'im that are sent are more or less indigenous to their territory, right? They know their populace. They know how to speak to them. People know who they are. Again, people know Hosea, right? He is also from the north. Again, probably from the Transjordan, but local kach mishaneh. Amos is from, it's like an American telling us like how to live our lives here, right? Meaning, why are you, telling us go to this rally, not go to that, whatever it may be. And therefore, Amatzia says, go back to Eretz Yehuda. V'chol sham lechem. From here we see that Nevi'im generally, certainly Nevi'ei HaMelech, were supported by the king. Basically, they were part of the king's cabinet. And he's telling Amos, get a job there, because
You're not going to get paid
we
here.
don't want you here. You're not getting paid here. V'sham t'nave, deliver your nevuot over there. Uveita lo tosifod li'nave. I don't want to see you ever again in Beito. Li'nave ki mikash melachu, u'beit mamlachachu. You're on government property over here. And what you just said, obviously,
Is treason.
Is treason. Amos vayomer Amatzia, lo navi anochi v'lo ben navi anochi. He says, don't think that I'm doing this for the money. Meaning, I never asked to be a navi. I wasn't trained to be a navi. Kibo kera anochi. I'm a cowboy. And I'm a rancher. Again, ovole shikmim. And this is also interesting because the shikma, the sycamore tree, and seems to be more indigenous actually to the north than it is to the areas of Yehuda. So some, for example, Yehuda Felix wants to claim that actually in the area of Tekoa, we can have shikma, and it is true. But it seems that he's not just speaking literally, that I'm a sycamore, presser, that I take the nuts and I have to beat them down, but this is more metaphoric, right? That this is what I do. I'm a cowboy and a boli shikmim. I'm trying to beat them up a little, to extract the good. And once it-
of the things in the north. Like
At the
I'm
north,
here,
exactly.
I'm here to do.
Meaning he's intentionally using the imagery of the north. And Hashem took me ma'acharei hatzon, v'yamrei li Hashem, lech, yinavei mi Yisrael. He says, believe me, I agree. If I could retire, I would. V'ata shmad v'Hashem ata omer lo tinavei al Yisrael v'lo tatikal beit Yitzchak. You're telling me not to deliver these political messages of Nevuah l'chekom Hashem, and therefore Amatzia, you who are not letting me get my messages across to the people. Your wife is going to be sold as a prostitute. Your children are going to be killed. Your land is going to be given up. And you're going to die. Again, on foreign, basically defiled soil. Yisrael galo yigledni alef matzah.
Amatzia personally.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Wow. But then he was in the middle of his nevuah. I always call this the scene of the rotten tomatoes. Meaning, Amos was in the middle of delivering his koheranis, his images, and Amatzia stops him after the destruction of Beit Yerabam, and now Amos is, wait, I have to finish with my regularly scheduled program. Koherani Hashem Elokim being a kluv kayetz, I see literally, a basket. Right, a kluv kayetz is a basket of harvest. Vayomer mata ro'eh Amos. And now that could be good to see a harvesting basket. What could it be a sign of? Harvest. Excellent. But
Reminds
what
us of
is
the
it
basket of
also?
2 figs from Yirmiyahu.
Exactly. Kol hakavod. To which Hashem also asks him, ma ata ro'eh. Is that interesting? Meaning, there are certain very unclear images, and Hashem knows this, and basically says, okay, Amos, what do you think about this harvesting basket of Amar Kluv Kayetz? Hashem says, yes. Why am I showing you a harvesting basket? Because Kayetz comes from the word kates, the end of the harvest. In other words,
The end.
the end. Bahaketz alami Yisrael lo sifa odavor lo. That's it. Gena, I'm leaving. Gena, this is the end of the people. Behelulu shiru techal bayamahu nam Hashem Elokim. Rav hapeger b'chol makom hashleichas. There are going to be so many dead bodies. And there's going to be silence everywhere. And this is basically Amos's last nevuah. Right? He basically looks and he says, he knows, by the way, how do I know it's his last nevuah? Because very soon, and he's had 8 prakim of destruction, and it's going to continue. And this one is going to be worse than any of them, all about darkness and ra'av. And not rav la'lechem alotam alamayim kim l'shmoa tevrei Hashem ve'inenu. And it's not a happy song.
No, it's
And terrible. Take a look at Perek Tet, where Itet Adonai Nitavar Mizrachim Rahafa Kaftor. The Yarshu Hasipim, Hashem tells him, okay, Amos,
hit the
it's
lintel.
now time, literally, the Kaftor was the cornerstone, right? Meaning, what's it called? The capstone.
The keystone.
Sorry, keystone, or the capstone, which held the entire house together. And now, literally, I want you to destroy it. And whoever, again, and this apparently he's supposed to actually do, lo yanus lahem nas, to show the people whoever here is destroyed, everywhere else is going to be destroyed as well. There aren't going to be any survivors. And wherever they think they can hide, I'm going to bring them down from there because they're not going to be able to survive. And when you say, what do you mean we're not going to be able to survive? We're Hashem's special nation. Amos turns and he says, you think you're special? Why do you think you're special? You think you're special because Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim? Guess what? I have news for you. Hashem took other nations out of servitude too. Again, halo kibnei kushiyim atem libnei Yisrael, halo et Yisrael leiti merit Mitzrayim. Oh yeah, but I took the Plishtim out of Kator. I took Aram out of Kir. Hine Hashem Elokim v'mamlacha chatata. Now I am paying attention to you, says Hashem, for what purpose? V'shmatati otam mi'al pnei ha'adama. And that's it. Hishmatati etchem. When we hear that, what are we all supposed to hear?
That's
Oh my
it,
gosh,
Shema.
that's it.
That's it.
Hashem's
Yeah.
going to destroy the Jewish people. Efes.
Fine.
Fine. Ki lo hashmid hashmid et Beit Yaakov nu Hashem. I'm going to destroy you, but not who's Beit Yaakov?
Yehuda.
Yehuda. That's exactly it. Ki ne anochi mitzaveh. V'ani otu b'chol hagoyim et Beit Yisrael kasher yono b'kvar. I'm going to literally disperse you to all the other nations and sift you out. V'lo yipol b'shor aretz. V'cherev yamutu kol chatei ami ha'omrim lo tagish v'tagdiv b'amdino hara'ah. Again, basically, I'm going to sift you out. All those who are sinning, then they're going to be the ones destroyed. But then, everyone take a look at this.
This is
Everyone
amazing.
realize this has been 9.5 chapters of nothing coming out of Amos's mouth other than
Destruction.
destruction. There's no Navi like Amos in the sense of, I'm going to say, the terrorizing fear that we discussed, this thriller effect. Again, the harshness of what he says, meaning even Yirmiyahu, who really is living during the time of destruction, always, again, seems to placate his nevuot with
Like an optimistic.
exactly a word or two of Nachama at the end. No single word of Nachama coming from Amos. So much so that that's part of his tactic. Just when you think it can't get worse and that he's about to tell you, oh, don't worry, what happens?
Oh, it does.
Oh, he tells you, oh, by the way, it's going to get worse. Right? And worse,
Until it's
and worse.
okay.
Exactly.
Except that
Then,
Rev Echelon
I have
has
to
a
build
very.
that up because we didn't learn all 9.5
That's
chapters.
what we said on Shabbat.
But thank you. It's not something. This was a very short nevuah that we read on Shabbat. Again, not starting this, but so someone who only reads the Haftorah
They don't appreciate
Parshat, that's exactly it. A Parshat Acharimo thinks that Amos is.
It's such a wonderful
Oh my
memory.
gosh! Wow, I love the nevuah of Amos. Really? Until we get to Vayomahu Akim et Sukkot Avinu. That only after the destruction will Hashem rebuild the Gadarti Pertihem Barisuti Vakim Ubniti Akim Olam Laman Yeshua Chivit Adom Chalagoyim Asher Nefashmi Alehem Nam Hashem Asiti Zot. And keep in mind that the focus is actually on the rebuilding of
Yehuda.
This is where I always imagined that Amos actually went home. Right? He did go home. Why did he go home?
Because it was hopeless there.
It was hopeless. He saw that if the Kohanim aren't letting him, deliver nevuot, then okay, time to come home. Hinei yamim ba'im nam Hashem, v'digash chorish b'chotzer, v'zorech hanavim b'moshe chazar, v'etivo arim asis, v'chol ha'gvot t'mogagna. I always imagine him standing at the top of Tekoa, looking out here on Efrat, right? You can see the whole, literally, the almost
Gvaot.
Sheva Gvaot of Efrat, Baramat Tekoa. V'shavti et shvutam Yisrael, banu arim nishamot v'yashavu v'natu kramim v'shatu et yinam. Mamash, every time I go to the Ekef here, I think about this puzzle. It really is just amazing that we're living during this time.
I love
And
the
think-
world that you actually see.
You see it. Vasu ganot v'achlu et prihem, literally eating from, getting your own backyards and your gardens. And I always imagine when Amos sees it, does he see it in 2026? Meaning, did he see it in 1980? When does he see it? And that's when you realize that the Navi sees it, but he doesn't know when it's going to happen because that's
up to us.
up to us. And now what's remarkable is Baruch Hashem that on one hand I keep thinking, why did it take so long? On the other hand,
Finally.
it took so long and we're here. And why is this so exciting? Because of the last puzzle. Unetatim alad matam v'lo yenatshu od mi'alad matam asher natati lehem amar Hashem Elokecha. When you get to this stage, what does Amos say?
It's
Then
fine.
That's it.
that's it. You're not going to go into exile ever again. And therefore I know that he could not have been speaking. Now he's Bayit Rishon, right? So he
There's two more
obviously was
going.
wrong, right, when it came to Bayit Sheni. And sure enough, that's why I know that he was looking at Efrat. Why? Because
That's
Alon
what's
Shrut
happening
was
now.
here during Bayit Sheni, right? Givat Achish, but Efrat, this area wasn't settled during Bayit Sheni. Right? Basically, he's saying that I see this image of just things being very successful. That didn't happen. Could it have happened during Bayit Sheni? Yes. But now you
it
know
should have
that this is
But
our
we did
time.
a tiyul, if you go from the gun and you go
Yes,
down
Then you
there,
see,
and that's where
Rechot
Shlomo
Shlomo.
HaMelech kept his
Those
Or the
are-
Hat
wives.
Shlomo, right?
Exactly. So that's farther down. That's really Dagan and Eitam. Right? So that you can't see from Tekoa. It's farther down, the Brechot of Shlomo, which really also linked up to the aqueduct system of the Hashmonaim, and later on Herod. Right?
So
The
that's
whole-
after
so
Bayit
that's
Sheni.
after Bayit Sheni. And by the way, that's proof of the fact people were living here. That's how they were able to use this. This was farmland, but it wasn't actual
Residential.
houses. Isn't that interesting? This area they didn't find from. They found by Alon Shput, the area of Givat Achish, had settlements and the mikvah, meaning along Derech HaAvot, but not this area. This was all farmland.
Doesn't Rav Yitzchak Echelon has a different perspective on this ending and the beginning. He says it's like an inclusio, that every single speech of Amos started with the the Yishag from Yerushalayim, like that whole roaring opening, and then this is the comforting ending that he says perhaps Amos used for every single one of his speeches, which
I would say that.
that's-
Yeah, exactly. You could say it. You could. It's a little hard to imagine that this was his refrain, considering that, meaning any other Navi, you're right, it could be that this was his style, and this is literally his refrain.
and then they made the Sefer
That's
to match that style.
Exactly. However, because you have the Shlosha Arba'a, but it just doesn't seem to fit with the general personality, meaning, okay, then to go from, can you imagine this? Asher natatam amar shem elokecha, and then hasal haaretz, it just, even for the people, it would be very confusing. And if so,
I mean, I call it
then
emotional
why would
whiplash.
Amatzia want to send him out so much? Meaning if he knows that, okay, he's
But
going to
partly
say
because
something good.
he's talking about Yehuda is
Correct.
going to be, so then it is
Yes,
still
yeah.
anti the kingdom of Israel. So
Yes.
it's like, it's not
So
so
that's
comforting
exactly it.
even for them. It's like, you think you're so special, you're not so special. Bnei Israel is gonna continue through Yehuda and
Exactly.
you're gone.
I mean, a lot
for
of-
nothing.
And a
That's
lot of
also
messages
even
are like
though-
anti them taking the things out of the Mikdash and
No.
reappropriating
That's-
Mikdash imagery from Yudah and using it in like
Exactly.
Gashmios things in Yisrael. So it's not necessarily a contradiction to say it.
It's not. It
It's
just
just-
doesn't sound stylistically, again, like Amos's refrain. It just doesn't sound like it. And especially as Shira said, this seems to be focusing on Yehuda. And again, even though he does incorporate aspects of Yehuda throughout his Nevuot, again, it would be just too extreme. It's like, when the chorus doesn't fit the stanzas. So you could say, because why not say it, right? Meaning, why do people say it? I mean, it's not just Yitzchak et Shalom. Why say it? Because it's hard to imagine that a Navi,
It was all harsh.
all harsh, and every other Navi incorporates, even if it's 2-3 psukim. So let's take these 2-3 psukim and tell it and say that
That was
this
his
was the refrain. You don't have to. And I think in the case of Amos, it actually does detract, particularly because Amos is so unique in so many ways. It doesn't bother me to say that he's unique in this way as well, especially because.
But then what is this ending doing here?
Because
it doesn't-
what's
it
his
doesn't
ending?
He
fit.
goes back to
He goes
Yehuda.
back
He
to-
goes home.
Thank you. He
All
goes
his hopes
home.
are there.
He goes home and Hashem says, remember Perek, hey, Yehuda's going to follow. Yehuda's
Right.
also going to be destroyed. He goes back home. I really do believe this. He looks out at Efrat, which is not, all settled. There are a couple of homes here. And he says one day he sees a picture, a real picture of this. He really does. And he says, oh my, like even he says, Hashem, how could there be so much destruction? And he comes back home and he sees that the day is going to come that it's going to be okay. Now, why not incorporate that? Because that would clearly detract from his message. What's his message?
Destruction.
Destruction, and do tshuva. That's exactly it. Now, something else that I think underscores this whole idea as well is that he can say whatever he wants. Meaning, why does Yirmiyahu have to deliver messages of I'm going to say a place? Because he has to keep his audience. This is his. Amos doesn't care about whether or not people listen to him. Why?
He's a foreigner.
He's
a
going
foreigner
back.
anyway. So go back. That's exactly it. You don't like the way that I give my shiur? Fine.
So don't come.
I didn't ask to be here either. Again, Hashem told me to come here. I'm just going to go home. And he goes home and delivers proper nevuot over there. Now, before we
But that doesn't make sense because he worked so hard to engage his audience. The first 7 chapters, like to try to get them to listen, he uses all these different
logic and
right, different types of styles of
psychological
speech and
strategy.
argumentation. So like, it just
100%.
doesn't make sense that he would just like after trying so much to engage them and speak and trash talking his own people. He trash
Correct.
talks against Yehuda in order to get their attention.
That's why I love, again, the end of Perek Chadente. It seems that even after he's threatened, he still continues, but up to a certain degree, meaning it seems that what happens at a
There's no
certain
response.
point.
There's, except for
Exactly
Amatzia, that was the
it.
only guy that got a
Meaning,
response.
I see like Amatzia is there, like, guarding at the big Tapulchan and says, oh, no.
But how
Yeah, no,
long
no, we
is
get here
it?
today.
Like, how long are those
Is that-
9.5
That's
chapters,
an excellent
time-wise?
question. We don't really know. Could he have delivered this all over the course of a couple of months?
Exactly.
Yes. Could it be over a
Mirage.
couple of
That's it.
years? Yes. Again, we don't really know. That's an excellent point, but it does help us understand now what's going on together with Perek Yudalit, Pasuk Chav Gimel. And so now we know that first what happened, Yonah ben Amittai came to Yeravam ben Yoash, and Yonah ben Amittai is from the north, right, from Gad Hefer, and tells Yeravam, like I can imagine with the sour face, guess what? Even though you don't deserve it, what's gonna happen?
You're gonna have a big kingdom, conquer.
Excellent.
Things will be
Now
good.
comes Amos, not directly to Yeravam, but to his Beit Malchut, and says,
It's going to be
your
doomed.
empire is going to be destroyed. Now, sure enough, Chazal say, oh my gosh, right, how can we have contradictory nevuot? We just explained how we can have two Nevi'im living during the same time, two Nevi'ei Hamelach Mesa, because they have very different styles. Ein Navi mitnaveh b'signon shel acher. Chazal actually answer, right? We have even two going on in Yehuda also. Again, we have Yeshayahu, we have Micha, again, who's going to come later. We have four Nevi'im shitnavu b'oto haperek. Literally four national Nevi'im, which tells us, if we need four national Nevi'im,
They're not
then
listening.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's exactly it. This is a very, I'm gonna say, iniquitous time for Am Yisrael. And I understand Hosea and Amos really do have very, very different styles. But it's really Chamisha Nevi'im Hitnavu B'Oto HaPerek. It's Yonah also. Now it's true he's not an ongoing Navi for Yeravam ben Yoash, but he does deliver this Nevuah. How do you understand contradictory messages of Nevuah? At least Hosea is also talking about destruction. But and Galut, but how about Yonah and Amos? So how do you understand them? If you're Yeravam ben Yoash and you're hearing from Yonah,
You're like,
well,
he's
yeah,
my
you're
guy,
gonna
come sit at my
expand.
table.
Excellent, you're gonna expand your empire, and then you hear Amos, and maybe this explains why he doesn't pay attention to Amos. Right? Amos tells you your Malchut is gonna be destroyed. How are we supposed to understand these contradictory messages? How could they both be true? So what do you know about a negative Nevuah? It doesn't have to be true, meaning that's exactly it. Yonah's Nevuah really does come true, and that's why the Navi says it came true. Amos is a warning that
If you don't change, this
if
is
you
what's
don't
gonna
change, that's exactly it. There can be contradictory messages. Keep that in mind. How else can you understand it? Now, in the end, Amos's also came true. In other words, they could be speaking about different time periods, and it seems that that's exactly it. Yonah was,
At the beginning of
okay,
his
first
reign.
you're going to expand. Amos comes and says, actually,
You're gonna
Malchut is going to be destroyed. And that is what happens after it expanded. As a matter of fact, the fall is even greater because of the initial
expansion.
success, right? Everyone see this? Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because we're going to find other Nevi'im throughout history that are also going to give contradictory reports. For example, when you open up Yirmiyahu, Perek Chavchet, and Bezrat Hashem, I hope that we'll get to this also, we're going to see how Yirmiyahu is going to be speaking about, and literally Yirmiyahu has been speaking about the destruction of Yerushalayim, comes along, and Galut, and again has been telling the people that they're not coming back from Galut for 70 years.
Mhm.
Comes along Hananiah ben Azor and says, actually, you're coming back in 2 years. Within 2 years, everything's going back to normal. And Yirmiyahu hears this, and he doesn't contradict Hananiah. Why not?
Because you can't.
And he knows that you can have contradictory nevuot. The only thing that's bothering him is that whose is the positive one?
Hanan.
And it's within 2 years. He gives a time frame.
That means you could just wait it out and see what
Exactly.
happens.
So Yirmiyahu's like, okay, maybe you're right, but then I'm wrong. Right? And he's very confused. And Hashem said, no! And that's when Yirmiyahu teaches us the rules of nevuah, meaning if a Navi gives a positive nevuah and Yirmiyahu gives a negative nevuah, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally okay. We had this, right? Amos and Yonah. However, and if a Navi gives a specific time period, then
And it
it
doesn't.
says
come
a positive nevuah is supposed to, in the name of God, has to happen. So if you gave a time period, then
true. Uh-oh.
Hananiah, you sure you want to do this? Because you're setting yourself up for possible failure. If it doesn't happen within 2 years, then what do we know?
That you're an Avisha.
Then you're an Avishaker. Everyone see that? And sure enough, that's what happens.
I mean,
So,
Yonah and Amos, they're not
Contradictory.
they're not contradictory because they're both giving the same message.
Exactly.
Their message is to return to Hashem.
Halakha.
So even in the when things are quote unquote good, like return, if you're not returning to Hashem, then clearly things are gonna get bad.
Excellent, excellent. So, again, what we're going to do actually next week is see that I agree with Nachum 100%. They're both speaking about okay, tshuva, right? Meaning, okay, if you expand, you realize, okay, this is from Hashem. It's not a political happenstance. And at the same time, again, we hear from Amos what's really going on during this time period. And what we're going to see, you know what, we can look at this very quickly if it's okay. Basically, we're going to see that indeed this is a society of a tremendous amount of wealth, right? That they're successful during this time. They have a sense of security, military security, economic security. And again, then we know, meaning that's why Amos comes on the scene and basically says, oh my gosh, wow, what have you done with this wealth? And he talks about how the rich have literally exploited the poor. How the upper classes in society, and that's why he, a wealthy man from Yehuda, can come in and say this and say, oh my gosh, I also live in a 5-floor mansion, but like what you're doing is terrible. It's not right. And he addresses the wealthy upper class of Shomron. Again, everyone ready for this? Okay,
It's
just
like-
take a look at Perek Vav.
It's like Karen Navo and
Excellent, excellent.
It's the same
and
idea.
he discusses even their expensive ivory furniture, again, their occupation with food and drink and entertainment, even their wives. Again, so I'll get to this also.
The fat
He
cows
says, take
of
a
the
look at, this is one of my favorite questions. And take a look at Perek Vav, it really is, and with this we'll end. Just to give you a
Amos.
sense, Amos, we're still in Amos. Take a look at Perek Vav, Pasuk, and Pasuk Aleph, Chai Hashamanim b'Tzion habotchim b'Har Shomron, nekuvei reshit hagoyim u'va'u la'em Beit Yisrael. You're all like these Shananim, you know what? They don't even work. Ivru chalanu ur'u l'chu misham chamad rabah, or do gat plishtim hatzuvim enamam l'chot ha'ileh. What, you think you're better than the plishtim? Again, basically all these other upper class societies that have then been exiled. Pasuk Gimel. Again, hamanadim liyom rabba tegishun shevet Hamas hashochvim al mitot shein. All of you who
Their
sleep on your
ivory teeth.
ivory beds, usrechim al arsotam, va'ochlim karim mitzon, you eat filet mignon, right? Like the best of the best. Va'galim mitoch marbik. Again, haportim al pi hanaval kizavit, and you think you're so frum, because what are they doing?
They're playing the Neva like
Playing as if
David.
it's a chashvu lahem klei shir, look, like we're like in the mikdash. I always say, like the people, you know, like these wealthy assimilated Jews that put like Judaica all over their house, like they have the most expensive chalukiyot and lift, hashutim and mizrakei.
Oh my God, Mizrakim are blood spattering.
Exactly,
Um,
they're using it to drink their wine.
vessels.
Therefore, you're going to be the first ones who are punished.
They don't
Or,
have a
for
flat bottom.
example, take a look at Perek Dalet. This is one of my favorite practices when you go up to the north. Shemua tadavar hazeh. And here we go. Listen, again, all of you. Asher anochi nosei alenekina. Who am I talking to? Betulat Yisrael. Sorry, Perek Dalet. Again, Shemua tadavar hazeh. Parot habashan. Who's he speaking to?
The fat
The
cows of
wealthy
Bashan.
women, the fat cows of Bashan. Yeah, he calls us fat cows. No,
No, not us, not
Again,
us.
Asher Bahar Shomron, Ha'oshkot. That's how you're going to be speaking to literally the
He's
women.
using
What are these
agricultural
wealthy women
language.
doing? Hoshkot alim, Haratzotot evyonim, Hamrot ladoneim, Haviyah v'nishteh. They have their, you know, their slaves do
Servants.
everything. Their
They
servants.
take advantage of them.
נשבע השם אלוקים לקדשו כי הנה ימים באים עליכם ונישא אתכם כן בציניות ואחריתכם בסיבות. You're going to be carried off again as prostitutes for these other nations. But that's exactly it. The women are also, again,
They're part of the
who knows how many
corruption.
housekeepers. But obviously the point is that they're taking advantage of the poorer classes in society. So that's what's really going on during this opulent time in Israel. We hear the religious interpretation coming from Amos. So the question is obviously, why isn't Yirmiyahu, right, reporting everything that Amos is reporting? Why don't we hear about these social misdemeanors? So we already mentioned that from Yirmiyahu's perspective, just as we saw with Yehu, just as we saw with Yoash, what does he want to focus on?
Yehuda.
He wants to focus on Yehuda, that's exactly it. And he wants to focus on, like, firstly, the religious decline. Don't worry, he also speaks about the social decline, certainly in his Nevuot, but he wants to explain, like, how, remember, from the beginning of Sefer Melachim, how you can have, like, the immanence of God through the Beit HaMikdash. What happens? Like, how could Hashem have left? And therefore, the focus is going to be more on the Ben Adam Lamakom. So, with, though, the Ben Adam L'Chavero messages of Amos, and definitely the potential for success of Yonah, with that, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will make the right choices during this time period, and we should have a wonderful week. I will not be here next week.
Oh.
Thank you. But then, after next Sunday, Be'ezrat Hashem, we have Shiur, I believe, every Sunday through June 20th.